All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Malvika, the moderator for today's conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today for this live session from across the globe. This is the fifth episode of the Biotechnology series, an ongoing series of conversations with experts and leaders in the biotech industry. Here, our guests share with us their thought leadership, their insights from their experience so far, their views on how the industry has evolved over the last few years, and their perspectives on emerging trends and upcoming challenges. The topic for today's conversation is the journey of oral insulin, the Oramed story. And on the panel today, we have Mr. Nadav Kidron, the CEO of Oramed Pharmaceuticals, and Dr. Prabhuda Kundu, who is the managing director and co-founder at Premise Biotech. Before we invite the panelists, I would like the attendees to know that we will open the session for questions towards the end of the session, about 20 minutes. As many questions as possible during that duration will be taken up. I request you to feel free and keep dropping your questions in the chat box for us to pick up towards the end of the conversation and share them with the panelists. Without further ado, I would now like to invite Dr. Kundu to share his opening remarks and also welcome our guest speaker for the day.
Thank you very much, Malvika. A very warm welcome to you, Nadav. It's amazing to have you here. So welcome to the fifth episode of Biotechnology.
Thank you, Prabhuda. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. Nadav, Mr. Nadav Kidron serves as the Chief Executive Officer and the Director of Oramed Pharmaceuticals, which he co-founded in 2006. Nadav is an entrepreneur whose experience includes senior executive roles in a wide range of industries. He co-founded Entera Bio as a joint venture formed by Oramed and DNA Solutions. He is a member of the IATI board and an international lecturer on the Israel's entrepreneur culture and the country's roots as an oasis of innovative ideas. Nadav holds a bachelor's degree in law and an international master's in business administration, both from Bar Ilan University in Israel. Nadav is also a fellow of the Meraj Business Executive Leadership Program and a member of the Israel Bar Association. He and I have a long association. We've known each other for over 7 years now, and it's absolutely a delight to have Nadav on the first of the two-part series on the oral delivery of protein therapeutics, and we look forward to hearing a lot. And now that the formal introduction done, Nadav, I really am excited to hear and engage with you on this wonderful discussion. And before we start, could I request you to introduce Oramed to our audience, please?
Sure, Prabhuda. Firstly, thank you for having me on. I think this is a very timely manner to hear about oral insulin and other developments. And as we know in life, everything is about timing. So I'm happy, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you.
Thank you.
Oramed is a company that I co-founded in 2006. What we have is a technology that allows us to take injection, to take peptides, and deliver them orally. The first thing that comes to mind when you think about getting rid of an injection is the patient's compliance. But as I hope that I'll have an opportunity to explain down the line, the idea of replacing the injection, the idea of delivering peptides orally is a major breakthrough way beyond the patient's compliance. We have now a few programs in our pipeline. The flagship program is oral insulin, and then we have a few other drugs that we're working on in different clinical developments that we are delivering them orally.
Thank you so much. It's amazing because we've been discussing oral insulin for decades. But before I get there, is there a way we could understand how did you get involved into Oramed?
Well, this is actually a funny story. My mother is a scientist, and all my life I knew that my mother worked on developing alternative ways to deliver insulin. As a kid, that's what I knew. And then about 14, 15 years ago, my mother told me, my background is I'm a lawyer, I have an MBA, I'm not coming from the biotechnology arena. My mother told me, listen, son, we had a breakthrough that we've made at Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem. And this thing can be a very needed product for millions of diabetics out there. And obviously Hadassah doesn't have the funds to take it into a clinical development. You want to step in and do something about it. So sort of the opportunity laid for my mother, and I said, sure. And I basically stopped everything that I did. I took the intellectual property out of Hadassah, raised the money, established the company. And here we are 14 years later, a little bit older.
And wiser, and a fantastic story to come forward. I mean, one of the questions which I've always wanted to ask you is, all of us who got into biotech went through a sort of, iteration, thought process, because we were partly from the field, but you were not. So, what was the thought process? Because I think a lot of, we have young scientists who, may want to move forward into other areas of work, or people not in science wanting to come and contribute to biotech. So what was your thought process? How did you process it? I understand the backstory, but personally coming from law, finance, getting into biotech.
I think, Prabhuda, you're touching now an extremely important point that I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to understand it, because I also lecture a lot in also in the medical school and some programs in Israel. And what I see is that there's a Chinese wall between the science and the business. And if you want to know the secret, the holy grail of a successful biotechnology venture is to break the Chinese wall and to get the science and the business to go hand with hand. That, I think, is the secret. If you're going to analyze successful startups versus failures, you'll see that many times the scientists come with a passion for science, but zero understanding in business, and sometimes vice versa. The minute we're able to combine the two, we stand a good chance because, and maybe I was a little bit naive in the beginning, but the big pharma out there are not in existence in order to make the world a better world. They're in existence to get a better return for the shareholders. That's the way the world works. And in order for us to bring a technology into maturity, we must make sure that it has the scientific justification, but it also have to have the right business strategy to make it happen. And that's why, more than I realized, my background as a businessman, along with my mother as a scientist, I think that was, if I have to look back and say, one of the key factors for success, it was that combination. And I think it's very important, anybody who's starting a company, anybody who's involved in a company, to make sure that you got both grounds covered.
I think, personally speaking, I absolutely relate to that, because when you start a company as an entrepreneur, it starts on an idea, it starts on a technology. But they didn't take that concept to the field, to the clinics, and then finally to commercial. You definitely need not only the smarts of business, but also a great team. And I know you've been able to put a great team together. And subsequently down the line and during our talk, we will touch upon that. Now, coming to the oral delivery of therapeutics, you and I both know this has been an area of great pharmaceutical interest. The world needs it and is absolutely filled with minefields and failures. So when you started off, I think it's very important for us all to know what was the vision that you saw at that time. And it would be very interesting for us to engage a little bit on that.
Well, I think at the time I was too naive and unknowledgeable to know what's ahead of me. That's why I took upon myself that impossible mission.
True.
but seriously, I think that one of the advantages in our field, and there's many disadvantages, but one of the advantages, and maybe the most important advantage, is that at the end of the day, we are here to help and to heal people and to make people healthier. And it's very hard to see it when you work every day, you negotiate, you deal, you do the business side. But at the end of the day, we know in the back of our mind, it's not like a real estate deal that it moves from one end to the other. Here, our vision is at Oramed is to bring an oral insulin that can make people in a better, healthier status. And that's a key thing to understand. The bottleneck, the problem is, when you look at that field of developing a drug, is that you have a real via dolorosa that takes tremendous amount of time and huge amounts of money. Okay, we're talking about 17 years in average to develop a drug. 17 years, okay? We're talking about almost, if you take into consideration the failures, you're talking about almost $1 billion to develop a drug. We're talking about a lot of money. And I think the biggest challenge in this industry versus high tech and other things, that at the end of the day, you're fully dependent on a third party which is not in your control. Meaning, let's say you go in under the FDA, or if you're in India, whatever it is, the regulator, you can do whatever you want to do, but at the end of the day, there's someone else that will tell you, this is okay, this is what I want from you. Whether you think it's justified or not, you're totally in their hands. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have in this industry.
Picking that up, Nadav, we all know, and I just spoke about it a little, that how difficult oral delivery of proteins is, and especially oral insulin. Oral insulin has been a beacon. So it would be wonderful if you could just touch upon a little bit for our audience here, the live audience, is the technology. Before we get into the commercial development and some of the discussions that you had with your investors, it would be very interesting if you could just peel a little bit about the technology that you have.
Okay, so here is where I do have to go a little bit more on the biology side, but I'm going to keep it simple. When we talk about oral insulin, we're talking about a technology that you swallow a capsule, okay, it goes through your body, and then it goes from the intestine into the portal vein, and it basically gets into the liver. Now, you have to understand that when you give an injection, then the insulin goes directly into the bloodstream. Now, allow me to be a little bit blunt and allow you to share what is the crazy thing that's going on today in the way we treat diabetics. What happens is a diabetic is someone who's got a lot of glucose in their blood. What do? We give them insulin. The insulin takes away the glucose from the blood. So suddenly we have a lower level of glucose. That caused the person to be hungry. So they end up eating more, and then they get more glucose in their blood. And then we need to go back to the insulin. So we are putting up the patients in a vicious circle that the insulin, or I'll say it differently, the diabetics who basically suffering from obesity and overweight, we treat them with an insulin that causes them to be obese and overweight, which is a crazy thing. And the idea of the oral insulin is to break that vicious circle. And because we're able to deliver it into the liver portally versus the injection, that changes out everything. And the reason is that the liver is the organ that regulates the secretion of the insulin into the body. And we're giving the body the real physiological control over the way things work. And then with a little bit of insulin, we can actually make sure that there's less production of glucose by the liver, and we're going to end up lowering the amount of glucose without all the damages that we have with the alternative way. That's why oral insulin is a major breakthrough that offers a new paradigm of treatment for the hundreds of millions of diabetics out there in the world.
I absolutely believe that, because I have been privy to some of the data, and I think that, and you know, you've also, Oramed has taken the liberty and the forward step of publishing a lot of the data in papers and in the association as posters. I think it's amazing. But if I could just take you back to your 2006 and 2007, what was it that when you spoke to investors, what made them give? I know you're a very smart man. You're based in Israel, which is the fountainhead of innovation. But what were the first couple of things that you sort of faced? It would be wonderful if we could know what you told them, and B, what their feedback was initially, because it was very helpful for some of the new thought processes entrepreneurs are going through nowadays.
So I think when we started the company in 2006, it was very earlier on, and there was a very, very little proof of concept. And I think what helped us attract investors were two things. I think one thing, it's been my mother's work, and I think her passion was something that the investors saw when they saw someone with tremendous experience and knowledge in this specific field. And that means being a professional. If someone comes and he says, I know this field, and not that she said it, but people know that she is one of the leaders in the world when it comes to alternative delivery of insulin, I think that's a major point, because the guy is a professional. And the second thing, I think in our case, the need was very obvious. So the combination of a professional team plus the unmet need, I think allowed us to get the investors and to start hitting this road.
Fantastic. No, sometimes I think down the talk, I will also give a personal experience that I've had with your mother in terms of how we got this started, but I will slowly come into that. I think that also is a fascinating story. Now that you're entering, I mean, you've gone through the stages of preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, and now as you entering the phase 3, I think it would be of immense interest to our audience, because how are you looking forward to the phase 3, Nadav? Are you looking at just type 2? Are you mixing type 1? What is the sort of cohorts that if you could share with us? I think it would be wonderful for our audience to hear you and hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so maybe I'll start, if you don't mind, because what I saw, and there's quite a lot of people here, so not everybody even know what's type 1 and type 2. So I'll just do 2 sentences on that, so everybody is on the same thing. So type 1 make about 5 to 10% of the total diabetics populations, and those are people who usually get it at an earlier age, and those are people that their pancreas is unable to produce any insulin, and they're totally dependent on insulin. The majority of the diabetics are the type 2 people who get it later on, because one of the two are a combination of an insulin resistance or they're unable to produce enough insulin, and unfortunately it's a progressive disease, so we're going to see the ability to produce insulin going down with time. They start with different medications, diet and exercise, take different medications, and eventually they also become insulin dependent patients at the end of the day. When we talk about oral insulin, and this is something very interesting, we've ran a meeting of our scientific advisory board. And like you mentioned before, I'm a firm believer that any business, the most important asset that you have is actually the people. And maybe I'll quote, I heard it in the name of Warren Buffett. I don't know if it's true or not, but he said, if you have 3 things, technology, money, and management, and you have to give up on one thing, he said you should give up on the technology, because with money and management, you can get anything done. So people is really everything. So when we had the meeting of really the top guys in the world, and we showed them the profile of the oral insulin, and when we asked them, sincerely, who do you think that will be a good fit for? So the bottom line answer was for everyone. Now, in the real world, it doesn't work that way, because you have payers and only going to be willing to pay for certain patients, and you have a lot of other things. But if I look purely scientifically, type 1 and type 2 should be getting the oral insulin. In practicality, we're about to start now a phase 3 in the United States under the FDA. This trial will be done only on type 2. Okay. But we have shown, and potentially we will pursue also the indication for type 1.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I think it's been amazing to hear this progress. But now just rolling back a little, it's been a long time in development, and you've said that you've had a lot of success. I would also like to touch upon what were your key bottlenecks when you started out with this technology, and how have you progressed with it, and what are the sort of steps that you took to take care of some of them, like scale up, and how is this going to become available widely? So if you could touch on some of those bottlenecks, it'd be wonderful.
So I'll touch on bottlenecks. I think one of the key challenges in any business, it has to do with communication, making sure that everybody understands each other, especially when you're talking about different countries. I'll just tell you a quick joke to show about communication. People understand the same thing. So a guy recently went into a taxi and he put the alcohol gel on his hands. And he said to the taxi driver, listen, I apologize, there's a little bit of a bad smell for it. So the taxi driver said, don't worry about it. I haven't been smelling for the last few days anyways. So, so you really want to make sure that both sides, everybody understand things in the same way. When we go into a phase 3, there's a few challenges. Firstly, you want to make sure that you have a package which is ready for the FDA, that the FDA say, I'm satisfied with it, and you can move forward. And that's a huge mission. That's number one. Secondly, you have to make sure that you're going to have the best partner to run actual clinical trials. We don't do it as a company. We're the third-party service provider, that they run it. We're talking about dozens and dozens of sites. The third thing is, logistically, it's extremely complicated. And unfortunately now, in days of Corona, just sending materials from one place from another, you get some of it done in India, you get some of it done in Europe, you have to send it to the United States and all of that. So that has been a huge challenge in these days during the Corona. And the problem is that it's one big domino. If one thing is screwing up, the whole thing is moving around accordingly. That's why it's extremely challenging business to manage. And as I said, it goes back to having the best people who can do it. So you can hopefully, anything that comes up your way, any hiccup, you know how to deal with it.
Oh, fantastic. No, it's lovely. So coming back to this whole thing of team, I know you have an extremely well-knit team, and it's extremely important for people out there to know that you have kept the team together for these over a decade, and you practically operate as a virtual company. I think it's important for you to touch upon that and how well you have managed to do that, running international clinical trials and so on and so forth.
So there's a few ways of how to build a company. I personally felt that there is an advantage by using as much as possible outside vendors versus building a big team. Everything has advantages and disadvantages. But in this business, it goes ups and downs as far as the different tasks that you have to do. And when you have an outside vendors, you're able to get someone that has a terrific experience, but you're also able to manage it in a way that whether you have the highs or the downs as far as how busy it is, you're going to get the service. And I believe that at the end of the day, it costs you less and it allows you to have a much smoother way of managing things. From what I hear and from what I read, this approach is becoming now more and more popular. And I see many more companies now who are keeping a very thin structure, which allows them to use third-party vendors and allows them to get things done in a smoother way to a certain extent.
Fantastic. No, I mean, coming to this point of valuable partnerships at a global level, I think there have been many times you've actually spanned from all the way from the United States, China, India, going into Europe. It's been phenomenal watching you from the sidelines, how you've built this entire supply chain up. So if there were one or two advices you would like to give the young professionals who are on the call, what would it be? That when they're trying to build some valuable partnerships across the globe.
So I think it's very important, if you want to talk about the deal that we've done in China, it's a very different mentality. And when we grow up, everybody grows up in a certain environment. And we're very used for the way things are and we take it for granted. It's very hard for anybody. It doesn't make a difference how old you are, how much experience you have, is to understand that the someone across the table, things that you think are obvious and you take for granted are actually totally not. So I think the idea that you opened yourself up to come and to trust people and to try and listen and to make sure you understand, it really, the bottom line is communication. If you communicate and people feel that you're honest and you're frank with them, then I think that's already 70% of it. And then if you have the right team on board that they actually execute, then you should be good.
Absolutely. I think communication is key, and the way you transparently run the business and you ask and you get and you deal with your partners, I think is very, very important. It gives them both a comfort, and you're right. I think the hub and spoke model of partnership is becoming very, very popular in the world. And coming to this, this is the time I think I should let the audience also in on what you and I were speaking a little earlier, is how did we get into this game? It was 2013, and we were attending the bio. And it just so happened that your mother, Miriam, Dr. Miriam Kidron, just walked by. Me and my colleague Nupur were at the booth. And it so happened that she had not even intended to meet with us. And the person she had sort of wanted to meet was not there. So she looked at us and said, can I sit down? And we said, of course, you're waiting for someone. And it was so fortunate that she turned around and she said, what do you guys do? I said, we make proteins. And she said, oh, I need a few. And who knew that 7 or 8 years later, we would be discussing this long journey in helping oral insulin come to fruition. It's been amazing. So to all
Prabodh, I think what you're saying is, and maybe I didn't say that you also need to have faith.
Yes.
Because any business school that you would have gone to, they would never teach you that, I just offer a chair to a lady and they may become one of your largest clients, right? So, so if you have faith, if you believe that things will turn out to be good,
yes,
that's probably the most important thing out there.
Absolutely. I think it's belief, communication, and transparency that builds global networks and partnerships that really, because what you're doing is you're taking the good of humanity and synthesizing together. I mean, oral insulin or oral delivery of proteins is never easy. However, I guess it's the synthesis of good partnerships that's really, really got you there. Now, transiting a little, Nadav, looking a little bit towards, slightly towards the future, and looking at the various modalities, you did mention that there were a few other, therapeutic areas beyond insulin that you're starting to explore. It would be important to understand, how do you see this technology transitioning oral insulin into commercial? So what do you see for other territories? And then I'll have a follow-up question on the other modalities.
Okay, so we're now at probably the most interesting point that we could have imagined, and that is that we plan probably in a month from now to already have the first patient enrolled in a phase 3. Okay, now for those who are not familiar enough with the field, getting the FDA and starting a phase 3 in the United States, it's a big deal. Now, the reason this is so interesting also in our case is because we've already shown that oral insulin is safe, and we've already shown that the oral insulin works. And in this trial, which is relatively not a huge trial, we're talking about 1,500 people divided into 2 trials. But the first trial, after 6 months of dosing, okay, so we have to recruit the patients. And then once the last patients get 6 months of dosing, and then we open the data. So we're going to see the data in a year and a change, okay? And that makes it into a very, very interesting point in development, because I think people understand the need for the oral insulin. I will just add one more thing about the need. Many times when you have an entrepreneur, many times when you come up with the product, you may fall in love with your own idea and you think, oh my God, this is the best idea. Funny enough, a lot of the most successful ventures, that whenever they're not able to raise money, when the Google guys started and they spoke about the search engine, nobody thought. Same with Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, some of the VC turned them down. What's the big deal to do a Facebook, whatever it is? But one of the biggest questions is if there's a need to it. What we've done, which I think was a very interesting exercise for us, we hired a research team and totally independent work done by them. And they interviewed about 100 patients, doctors, payers, and they asked them, here's the story of oral insulin. They didn't even mention the name of the company. How likely are you to use it? How likely are you to recommend it to your patients, and so on and so forth? And this exercise taught us a tremendous amount how much oral insulin is needed. In a way that even us as the founders and the people who did the whole oral insulin, I think we didn't realize until we actually saw these interviews with dozens of people who say that what we have today, we have side effects, we have issue. If you can come up with something which has basically zero side effect, it's easy to take, and it's clinically relevant, it's a huge thing. And right now we're seeing some interest from different companies in different territories around the world about partnering up with us and taking it into their respective territories. And I think over the next few months, as we move forward, and as we're going to get closer to get the results out, I really hope that we'll be able to share news about other partners who will be going in with us on the oral insulin.
It's a phenomenal journey. Now, looking at my second part of the question is, what are the other modalities that you are looking at? We obviously would look at expansion of this portfolio beyond oral insulin. And so what are the other modalities that you would be very, very interested in to take forward?
So I have to throw right away, and Prabhuda, I'll throw it right away because everybody asks me about it, and I'll put it out there. Everybody asks me, will your technology work for COVID-19 vaccine? And the answer is that we believe that as long as the vaccine is not an RNA vaccine, but it's a protein-based vaccine, we should be able to deliver it orally. The only thing I'll say further than that is that we are looking into it, and as soon as we have updates or things to share, we'll share it in the right, proper way, as every public company does. So that's number one. I had to put it out there because that's the most popular question, so it's out there. We put it out there. Besides the oral insulin and besides COVID-19, we believe, and you know, I'll just explain one more thing about the COVID-19 because it's important to understand. The idea of vaccinating the population of the world, okay, we talk about 8 billion people, and probably different countries will have the vaccines first or whatever, because a big challenge with the COVID-19 vaccine is the production. And you need to produce this, very, very fast. The challenge is that there's a certain part of the population that will have a hard time with the injection. You know, there's going to be very old people that they wouldn't want to go next to the place where you get to the injection, and it doesn't make sense to send somebody to their house. So if you can offer a certain segment of the population something that you can actually go to this person's house and just take it orally, or some people will say, you know what, I'd rather pay whatever, $20 and not stand in line to get it there. So there's going to be a certain percentage of the population that whatever the winner vaccine is going to be, they would need and they would want to use an oral version of that. So that's COVID-19. We cannot have any discussion today about anything without putting at least 2-3 minutes mentioning the word Corona. We've done it. We checked the box. We're working on a few other things. We're working on a drug called GLP-1 analog, which is a very potent drug giving to diabetics. And we are in mid-advanced clinical studies with that. We're also working on something called leptin. Leptin is a hormone that does an amazing job. And once we eat our food, it sends the message to the brain that we ate enough. And we're supposed to start eating. I don't know about you, but for me, it doesn't always work that way. But the idea, if we can actually deliver the leptin orally, so there are receptors within the gut. So using Oramed's technology, we can get the leptin right into the receptors, and then it goes directly into the brain. The brain tells you, mister, you had enough. You don't need this dessert. Stop there, and hopefully you eat less.
Yes.
And the other thing I would just mention about the oral insulin, which is very interesting, is that throughout the trial and extra trials that we did, we're able to show, and that makes a lot of sense because it's all part of the metabolic syndrome, that the oral insulin actually works for NASH, for fatty liver, which is, I don't think we have the time, but that's a very interesting topic because that's one probably of the most common diseases out there that we don't have any good therapy right now, but everybody understands the need. And it seems to be that oral insulin will be a very good and elegant solution for that as well.
Fantastic. No, I mean, it's amazing to hear that how the expansion of this platform is happening and so on and so forth, and how obviously, as you said, with COVID-19, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions coming to both you and me in terms of, because on one hand, you have oral insulin or the oral therapy, and we are working in COVID-19. I'm sure there will be questions coming in saying, is there a potential, working together relationship? But before I get there, Nadav, just to quickly come to a conclusion, because I think we have a lot of people on the call as the audience, and I'm sure they'll have a lot of questions for you, as well as some for me. What is the vision for your company going forward? And we've talked about the extension, we've talked about the other modalities. What do you see? We've heard from you the vision which you started with in 2006. What's the vision going forward?
So we have, a platform that I remember about 10 years ago, we spoke to a professional company and they said, how come you're not working on 50 different drugs? They said, you have something amazing. You show that your platform works, period. And there's a huge need for it. Mm-hmm. So in real life, sometimes you have limitations and the ability for us to work on 50 drugs at the same time are obvious. But I think down the line, we want to use that platform because we're able to show that it's a very good platform and to use it for many other drugs. And ideally, we want to start with drugs that are not only there just because of the patient's compliance, but through this different way of delivery, we can offer a better therapeutical solution. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to be a part of, we have an expression in Hebrew called tikkun olam, creating a better world. And we believe that money is important, but health and doing good are the most important things. And we're very privileged to be working in a field that we have a mission and we can work hard on potentially helping hundreds of millions of people to be healthier, to feel better, and to really be part of a better world out there.
With that, thank you so much, Nadav. I mean, one last question, which I always feel that young entrepreneurs in the audience should know is, if there are 3 quick lessons coming from Nadav Kidron's book of management or book of life, what would be the 3 quick lessons or words? What would those be? And over to you, Nadav.
So the first one is, like I said, if when I started the company, if I would have known what's coming my way, I'm not sure I would have done it. So anybody who's skeptical, tells you it's not going to work, whatever, don't give up. Now, but on the other hand, don't be stupid. Don't go all the way through in something that doesn't make sense. So you want to make sure that you have a system in place that when you choose your goal, when you choose your business, choosing it right is extremely important. So make sure, you don't take the no's, you don't take the yes. You really have to feel you have your own conviction. You have to believe in it. Only then it's going to work. So that's the first thing. Second thing we said, and I no need to repeat, people management. Make sure you have people you can trust, good people to work with. That's the first thing. The second thing. And the third thing, I'm actually going to change from what I was going to say, and I'll say faith. You have to have faith because it's difficult out there. And unless you're going to have the drive, unless you're going to have the vision, unless you're going to believe in yourself, when I read the biographies of every real big successful entrepreneurs, there's so many points along the way that they probably should have given up. But if you have the drive, if you have the faith, if you believe in it and you keep on pushing, I believe, and you should believe, that eventually you're going to win it.
I think that's a perfect, note to have, pause our discussion. You and I, we can discuss this to the end of the day, but I can see that a lot of questions have come in. So with that, thank you so much, Nadav. It's been amazing, to speak with you and get across your thoughts. So thank you so much. I'm deeply, deeply grateful for your time and your friendship and your partnership. So Malvika, with that, could we open the discussion and the floor to some of the questions that may be
But
there.
maybe, Prabhuda, maybe I just say one more thing. So just that you mentioned that we've been working together, and I just want to say that it's not often, Prabhuda, that you're able to work with a partner and really become friends. And that has to be when there's a tremendous amount of trust. And I think the best lesson that I could show anybody is the relationship that we have built through business to become both friends and really trusting partners to the extent that, you know, I don't need a contract, I don't need anything. If I have your word, I know I'm there. So I'm very privileged, Prabhuda, to have you and Primas as partners, and I'm very thankful for you offering the chair to my mother back then, which allowed us to be here today.
Absolutely. No, it warms the heart, Nadav. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Malvika, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kidron and Dr. Kundu, for such an insightful session. You're absolutely right. We, in fact, have a lot of questions that have lined up. The first question is from Anish Vijayakar, who asks, do any of your product developments include oral insulin for type A diabetes, or is it only for type 2 diabetics? If yes, what stage of development is this product? I have a 12-year-old son who is type 1.
Okay, so I can tell you that we get a lot of emails and messages from parents to type 1 that are eager to find a solution and a replacement to the, can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
That
Yes.
are eager to find a replacement to the injection and to the pump and all of that. So currently our phase 3, as I mentioned, is moving on with the type 2, but we have done the work with the type 1, and we can potentially move into a phase 3 with the type 1, which we intend to do down the line. And I think it's something that will help the type 1, not just to deliver them the insulin, because they will still need the pump to a certain extent, but their liver is deprived from insulin. And by us giving the liver right away, it will help us to put them in a much more stable status and eliminate a lot of the extreme events that some of the type 1 are experiencing. And I can tell you, when we've done trials on type 1s, one of the things that made this very difficult for us is the type 1. We did once a trial on brittle diabetes, which are type 1s that have lots of the extreme events of hypo and hypo. And the patients at the end of the trial, they said, can we please keep on taking the oral insulin? We took it for a month. If I remember correctly, they said, can we please take it longer? And we said, we wish we could give it to you, you know, but we have to work with the protocols. And that goes to the frustration that you have a great product and it's safe and people want to use it, but we have to go through the FDA route and it takes a long of time. So the solution is there, is waiting to be there. It's going to take some more time, and then many more people will be able to use it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Maybe just to make things just a little bit easier, because I see there's a lot of questions and I know we are a little bit limited in time. So maybe if you want to do a few questions together, and I'll try to answer it in a little bit of a faster way.
All right. So this question is from Disha Datke, who says, is your team also working on delivering monoclonal antibodies orally?
Okay, so we mentioned the idea of the COVID vaccine, and as I mentioned, once we have more information, we will share it in the appropriate way.
This one's from Tracy Hobgood. She says, good morning all. Why is it that the FDA can fast track other medicines, but with one as important as Oramed, it's taking so much longer to get approval?
So the real answer is that we are not fast track, but we're not doing the regular track as well. The FDA acknowledges that insulin is a drug that's been out there and it's been in use for many, many years, almost 100 years. And therefore, what they're asking from us, it's not the same as a new chemical entity. So we have a fast track, not as fast as they would have liked, but it is getting to the market faster than if it would have been a new chemical entity. So that's definitely it. And I want to say, and you know what, when it's due, it's due. I want to say a word of compliment to the FDA. With our recent work with them, the response time has been very fast, very professional. It seems that they're eager, just as much as we are, to get this product out there. And it's a pleasure to work when you have third party that really wants you to get it out there into the market.
All right. I know that you mentioned for me to take them up in a bunch, but I think it'll be better the way that I've listed them to go one by one, but I'll be super quick with it. The next question is from Robert Leigh Boyer. He says, oral insulin has been attempted before. What is the difference between Oromed's drug and other previous attempts?
Okay, so the answer has a few folds. Number one, obviously the technology evolves, and things that were tried years ago, we came up with a more advanced technology that obviously works better. Another thing has to do with the indication. Like I mentioned, we really focus on the idea that we deliver it to the liver, and maybe for a split of a second, I saw the question that came up about cost of goods and amounts. So let me just already answer that because it's all related to each other. The idea of the portal delivery is that we're actually getting insulin that signals to the liver, okay? Because how does the liver know when to put glucose and when to put insulin into the bloodstream? There's a signaling system. If I'm getting insulin into the liver, so I'm sending a message to the liver, listen, you have too much glucose. And then the liver shuts up the excessive production of glucose by the liver. And that allows you to use a small amount of insulin. As we actually showed in our phase 2B, you see that small amounts of insulin can get you even better results than larger amount of insulin because of the signaling system. And what we're doing in Oramed is we're totally leveraging the idea of that into the technology, which is different than what some of the other companies try to do, which was just 100% replacement to the injection, which is not our indication. So again, I moved it to a little bit of a faster pace, but I hope it's clear enough.
Thank you, Nadav.
Thank you. This question is from Viresh Sheth, who says, what are the challenges in oral delivery of therapeutic proteins, especially in terms of scaling it up?
Okay, the challenge is that the first challenge is that you have the problem of the degradation, and because of the molecular size, it's impossible for it to get into the bloodstream. Scaling it up, one of the biggest challenges what we have has to do with a big part of our technology, which is an adjuvant called SBTI, which is a protease inhibitor. And thankfully, our partner to that is Primas. So when it goes to scaling up, we're in very good hands because we know we can rely on Primas on making sure that we can scale it up, be ready for the market with relatively low cost of goods and the ability to produce it on a high level.
Cool. This is from Teresa Okiev. She says, is oral insulin stable at ambient temperature, or does it need to be refrigerated?
Okay, so there's the formal answer and the informal answer. What I can tell you, the informal answer, we saw that it is stable without being refrigerated. For the label and our stability data, I have to remember exactly how we did it. I think we probably recommend for it to be refrigerated, but I think we're going to show on further stability studies that a huge advantage over the injection should be that you can actually keep it for room temperature. For how long and all of that, we have to see the exact stability data.
All right. Gautam Das asks, when you say zero side effects, are you suggesting that it doesn't induce any hypoglycemia when overdosed?
Yes, because the liver is the organ that can take basically 80% of the body's insulin is being stored in the liver. In the year 2000, there was a trial was made in Russia by a scientist named Shishko that he put a catheter of insulin into the liver. And one of the things that you saw is that you can put so much insulin into the liver and the liver stops it. It doesn't get into the bloodstream. So that's why, that's the basic advantage of the oral delivery is that this is the safest way to deliver insulin, because if you give it as an injection, you give a little bit more, you're going to get it. But if you give it through the liver, you can give so much more and there's going to be zero side effect. Absolutely. And no other side effects as well. It's almost like taking a glass of, this is sparkling water, almost the same thing.
All right. The next question is, what are the timelines you see in the oral insulin journey? The next key milestones maybe.
So the most important thing is that I hope in a month from now or so, we will get the first patient in the first trial of the 2 trials of the phase 3. It should take us up to 6 months to recruit all the patients. And then once the last patient is in, 6 months after he got dosed, we're going to open up the results. And that's going to be the biggest drama, because that's going to be a readout on a phase 3. We're going to see, and again, I'm not a prophet, but I assume we're going to see there's no issue of safety, because I mentioned to you the way it works. There shouldn't be an issue of safety. And we're going to see the exact level of efficacy, which again, my guess would be that giving it for 6 months versus 3 months of the phase 2B, we should even see a higher level of efficacy, but that yet to be seen. So in a year and change, the biggest drama will happen is we're going to unfold the result of the first trial of the phase 3. Right. And that point, just to make it clear, we know where we are. So we know what's going to happen on the second trial. We know the timeline. We know the exact demand. We know everything. We know the dosing. We know the cost of goods. So at that point is going to be the biggest drama in the world of insulin. And it's probably going to be a little bit before 100 years from the time the insulin was invented that the biggest turnaround will come again.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you. This is another anonymous one. Can you control insulin resistance with this technology?
We control insulin resistance is a difficult way of saying it, but I believe that when we give it orally, okay, you're a little bit doing a bypass, because again, like I mentioned, you're doing the whole thing with the liver. So that's why it's a little bit different than what we said about the injection.
All right. Dheeraj Lakhan Singh asks, is there a response time benefit or not with your oral insulin product?
So the timing, and that's one of the biggest differences between us and the injection, unless the injection, which is immediate, when we give it orally, because it's encapsulated, it takes about 60 to 75 minutes until it reaches the bloodstream. So it's very, very different as far as the injection, and there is a little bit more of a wait time until it gets into the actual bloodstream, but the effect to the liver is happening earlier on.
Right. Klaus Foskreen asks, when do we expect the BLA to be approved for ORMD 0801?
So the way it works is we need to run the first trial of the phase 3. We're going to get the results of that. We're going to get the results of the second trial of the phase 3. And then we have to submit the BLA. We're talking here about a year altogether of all of that as well. And then in the United States, we're talking about 2024 for it to be approved and to go into market.
Okay. This question is to PK. Prabhuda, how are you scaling up and how do you control COGs as Nadav says?
That's an interesting question. So a couple of things without giving away too much is about 7 years ago, we analyzed the process and found there to be a large number of steps. So against that, we put on the ground is which of those steps can be scaled up easily and which couldn't. So very early on in the process, before the clinical trial started, in all seriousness, we got into it and we analyzed, and in certain cases where there were 14 steps, we brought it down to 6. We replaced certain material which was easily available and could be scaled up very easily. So we've now gone beyond, and we are able to make a number of kgs per week, which translates into a fairly scalable process. And once you are able to scale up on a sustainable process, that brings down the cost of goods.
Yeah. All right. This one says, will the regulations of oral solid medication be still applicable to oral delivery of therapeutic proteins, or like biosimilars will, or just like biosimilars, will new guidelines or regulations have to be required here?
I'm not sure I fully understand the questions, but we were just switched because of the due date of when this drug will be out there. We were switched into the BLA, the biologics, and therefore we are 100% under biologics, which has one huge advantage that many times goes unnoticed. And that is that from the time the drug is registered with the FDA, we're getting 12 years of exclusivity regardless of the patents. No one else can sell oral insulin in the United States for 12 years, which is quite a big deal that we get with the biologics track.
All right. This one's from Zishan Fatima, who asks, will this be active form or will it be pre-pro? Are you going to do testing for gestational diabetes as well?
So right now we looking into the type 2 and then potentially the type 1. I'm not sure I understood the first question, but since we have a lot of questions, so let's keep it. I think let's keep it rolling.
Okay. Well, I have more here. How much time does the oral insulin take to get released into the blood, and how much time is it expected to be taken in a day? What would the dosages be like?
So we answered the first part. I'll answer the second one. Ideally, we would like for it to be once a day. What we saw in the phase 2B, that once a day and twice a day basically gave us the same results. Maybe a little bit in the beginning, twice a day was a little bit better, but at the end of the day, after 90 days, once a day was the same. The ideal thing from cost of goods and compliance would be to give as least insulin as possible, and once a day. Anything more than once a day is just patient's compliance. It's more complicated. So we could be in a scenario that even twice a day can be a little bit better, but we're still going to choose the once a day if it's good enough, because from the patient's compliance point of view, it's much more attractive.
Awesome. So Charita asks, would you be commenting on any observed adverse effects in the clinical trials? Is anyone following or doing a subgroup analysis on the data to observe whether the oral delivery is helping other ailments under the umbrella of metabolic disorders?
Okay, so we have to, if there's something huge, we have to report, and then there could be a potentially, if it happens to a company, there potentially can be a clinical hold if it's related. Other than that, if it's not very big adverse events, we're only going to report at the end of the day. It could be that I'll be able to share with, if I'll have talks like that, whatever, so doing the trial, I can say, so far we've got 400 patients and it seems to be okay, things like that, we will be able to communicate. As far as the other things, yes, we're definitely trying to take advantage of this trial, and we're trying to look at almost every measurement that makes sense. We want to show time in range. We want to show anything that we can show. We want to take advantage because we're already putting all the money and all the effort. And like we spoke about the metabolic syndrome. So we have a list of things that we want to show improvement on. And I firmly believe that we may be surprised to the better and to see that the oral insulin helps with other things as well. Again, because of the special and unique physiological way of delivery.
I think, Malvika, we are approaching very close to the ending of our talk.
We have about 2 minutes.
Yeah, we got about 2 minutes, and I've got a couple of questions which have come to me personally. So if I can relay some to you, Nadav, that I'm going to read out. Absolutely. One comes from Lucas Huntimer. Have you explored the application and markets for animal health in pets, particularly dogs and cats that are prone to diabetes? That comes from Lucas.
So the answer is that we feel that this can be very relevant. It's a growing market. There's a lot of people who have pets and they will invest the world in their pets. We had some previous discussions, and I think it's something that we need now that we're going to be undergoing the phase 3 to pick it up and examine it even more. So the answer is we've done a little bit and we should do a little bit more.
Fantastic. Then I have one more. He says, will it be easier for you to pass the trial in China than any other geography?
So as far as what's going on in China, we're being fed the information from our partners, and the way they describe it is it sounds that the trial in China will be faster. They basically started the phase 3, and it looks that they will get into the market in China way or before we'll be able to get in the United States. It's a totally different way of thinking as far as the Chinese FDA, and they've done a tremendous amount of work and a well done work that allows them to initiate the phase 3. And it should get into the market, as I said earlier on. And obviously, once it gets into the Chinese market, Oramed is entitled to get 10% royalties from the net sales of the Chinese partner.
Thank you. And other 5 or 6 questions that were directed have already been answered by Nadav. So Malvika, over to you.
Yeah, I think we're actually on time now. And I know that there are a lot of questions that we weren't able to take up because of the lack of time, but we do have email addresses, and the team will send an email to answer some of those questions. So the attendees can rest assured that your questions will be answered post the conversation is over. Thank you so much to the panelists for your valuable insights and the interaction. And obviously, thanks are due to the attendees for such great questions and for participating. I would now just like to invite Dr. Kundu to give his concluding remarks and close today's session, please.
Thank you very much, Malvika. Nadav, as always, very grateful to you for your wonderful talk, discussions, and the session. I think it's been very, very illuminating. I learned a lot as well. And thank you so much. It's been wonderful. And to everyone else, this concludes the part 1 of the oral technology series. The part 2 will be on November 18th with Dr. Miriam Kidron and other panelists as well. So with that, Nadav, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prabhuda. It was nice and fun and always good to connect. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. And to the audience, thank you so much for coming on. We had a large number of people, Nadav, so I'm sure this is going to, just start the initial interest for many of them. So look forward to everyone on November 18th again. Thank you so much. And very good morning to you, Nadav, and goodbye to everyone else.
Thank you.